Good afternoon and welcome into a special edition of the Sooner Tailgate Show. My name is Jason Ray, your host as always. Thanks for joining in. I was actually on vacation this week, didn't get back as quickly as I anticipated. So my apologies. I think I mentioned that I might have to reschedule everything last week, and so we had to reschedule everything for today. So if you're not joined, you don't have that you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you know when we do when we do go live. And so we have to change things from time to time. So thanks for jumping in. And always, if you missed the live, about 30 minutes after we finish the live show, you'll be able to go to come back and look at this and watch this at any point. So a lot of stuff to get to this week. A lot of it's really revolved around recruiting right now. But a lot of good things going on the recruiting trail for Oklahoma, particularly a couple of commits that Oklahoma has had this week since we last went live, and we'll get to that. And just any questions that you guys have, or comments, or anything that you guys want to talk about related to the season. I know it's a little bit of a slow time, generically speaking, but it's about to get ramped up really, really quickly. I don't know that they've announced the date for fall camp to begin, but typically probably about a week and a half from now. 2 weeks from today will be August 5th. So I would anticipate it starting somewhere in the middle of the week, or that week. So anywhere from the 1st to 2nd to 3rd, somewhere around there. So yeah, we're getting close. I know it's always, for me, I think I'd mentioned this before. I think it's always when the end of the softball season ends to the beginning of fall camp, it's just such a long period. So but we're getting close. Luckily, we've got a lot of recruiting news going on right now, and a lot of other players that we're keeping track of. So like I said, make sure you hit that like and hit that subscribe button always. And also remember on Wednesdays to make sure you check out Mark Rogers and Jason Watkins live at 11:30 a.m. every Wednesday. They'll give you, hopefully not the same exact content that we're giving you here on typically on Friday afternoons, but we'll try to diversify that a decent amount so that you get something a little bit different in terms of that. So let's start out with, as we go here on our 4th edition of our Sooner Tailgate Show. So let's kind of start talking about the recruiting that Oklahoma has had. I know that there's been probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, we kind of got on here, and maybe even further than that, there was a lot of maybe not necessarily panic, but there was still some continuous concern on what Oklahoma is going to look like from a recruiting class perspective. A little bit of concern that Oklahoma didn't have a lot of commitments as of yet. And then, kind of July has happened. And then as I mentioned last week, 2 big time commits on the offensive side of the ball. Zion Raggins committed earlier in the week, 4-star wide receiver, committed to Oklahoma. And then yesterday, 5-star running back, 2-Sport U athlete Taylor Tatum, from Longview, Texas, committed to Oklahoma over USC. So over the last week and a half, Oklahoma's got some big time commitments on the offensive side of the ball, which I think is really, really good for this staff, knowing what they. I think the thing that was concerning for outsiders looking in was that, okay, when Lincoln Riley left, would the offensive recruiting go with him? So now you see that Oklahoma has landed over all these last 2 classes, that Oklahoma has landed the number 1 ranked number 1 ranked quarterback, number 1 ranked running back, and then the number 1 ranked tight end, all in the country, consensus number 1 in the country. So I think it's safe to say that this recruiting staff on the offensive side of the ball it is just as solid as it's been previously. So Oklahoma's jumped up to number 16 overall in the 247 team rankings for 2024, and it's just getting started. If you guys follow Hayes Fawcett, does a lot of the edits for some of these kids that announced their commitments. Put out a tweet yesterday that talked about how just what Oklahoma's recruiting class could look like, the upward mobility that it was trending up. And August is going to be a big, big, big month for the University of Oklahoma in terms of what this recruiting class, the making of what it could possibly be. So I had a couple of questions. As much as I didn't want to get carried away until signing day, I would admit the excitement is building. Yeah, Hank, and I think, and I appreciate you with the, with the mention of hitting the like, and yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Hank. I think you have to take it a little bit with a grain of salt because these are young kids that have the opportunity to change their mind. Obviously, between now and signing day, and nothing's official until that letter of intent is sent in with a signature. But yeah, I think you have to be really, really excited to where Oklahoma's at. I mean, Oklahoma has seen a lot of these on the offensive side of the ball. There's not a ton of them that have panned out big time, right? I mean, when you look at, I think Riley got a lot of notoriety for how big of a recruiting class that he had on the offensive side of the ball. When you talk about, Spencer Rattler, when you talk about Caleb Williams, when you talk about some of the wide receivers that he was able to get, Hazelwood, Trajan Bridges, Theo Weiss, and really outside of Caleb Williams, I don't think that you could say that any of them have really lived up to the 5-star billing that they've had. There's certainly a little bit more time for Spencer Rattler here at South Carolina, but still, outside of Caleb Williams, there's not been a big, they've not really performed to the measure. So we'll see how this, as you compare the two, how this continues to go. But I think what a lot of people, including myself, are really, really excited about is this potential defensive haul that Oklahoma could get. Now, we've talked a lot about these guys, and so we'll continue to talk about them until they commit. And I think a lot of these guys will make decisions probably here in the month of August. A lot of them are wanting to get this over with, particularly some of the big ones. Williams Nunari is the biggest one, I think, probably, right, just in terms of overall ranking on 3, number 1 overall, 247. I think he's number 3. There's been some rumors about August 1st. I haven't seen anything completely definite in terms of his announcement. I think in everything I've heard, he's still very, very much OU is a clear leader for him. I think then you look at David Stone, I think depending on who you look at, number 6, number 7 overall player in the country as well. Again, we've said this several times. I still believe he's going to be a Sooner. At the end of the day, heavy lean. I think he's probably been, if you want to say silent commit, I think he's probably been silently committed for quite some time for Oklahoma, and I think he's doing some things behind the scenes to get some of these guys to Oklahoma. Nigel Smith, there was a crystal ball that had him to Oklahoma as well. I think he's in a good position now. I think one of the ones that's a little bit interesting that has continued to gain steam over and over and over the last week or so is Dominic McKinley. He is a guy that is right there in LSU's backyard, and I think it was always really a foregone conclusion that at the end of the day, LSU would do enough things, get enough done to get him into Baton Rouge. But from what I've been able to hear, I think McKinley right now, I would say that he is an Oklahoma lean. I think Oklahoma leads by, I don't know if I would say a considerable margin, but Oklahoma certainly leads in that recruitment right now, which is, like I said, a little bit surprising. From 2 weeks ago, I would say that LSU was the odds-on favorite. Now, still, plucking a guy out of LSU's backyard is still going to be easier said than done, but I still think that that's something that absolutely could be done. Another 5-star defensive lineman there. And so when you look up and down Braden Platt, who's an um, Oklahoma guy, in terms of his family, uh, had been really a big time Oregon lean. I think things are headed the other direction. Oklahoma's in a good position there. We can continue to go down the line. Caden Durham is a guy that I think, as much as the stock has been a little bit up for Oklahoma on McKinley, it might have gone down a little bit with LSU. Now, I think the thing that to understand for Caden Durham is he's probably going to be a two sports star as well with Oklahoma in terms of what he's going to be doing on the track and field um, side of things. So um, you really have to love right now, as it states on July 22nd, really have to love where Oklahoma is on the defensive side of things and recruiting. If they can find a way to get a majority of these guys that I mentioned. This will be one of the biggest, maybe the best recruiting. Sorry about that, guys. One of the best recruiting, defensive recruiting years that Oklahoma's ever had, specifically, definitely in the modern era, without a doubt. So I think that will be really, really big to keep an eye on for Oklahoma and for this team as they go into this 2023 season, and obviously the 2024 recruiting class. Grant Bricks is another guy on the offensive line that you kind of, depending on who you talk to, you like where OU's at, really in a battle with Nebraska. I don't think Oklahoma, I don't know that I would necessarily say that Oklahoma really leads for him at this point, but I know that it's a battle that Oklahoma is very much in with Grant Bricks. Like I said, I think it really seems like it's more Oklahoma Nebraska battle. Kansas State is there from a girlfriend perspective, but absolutely, I think there's a good opportunity for Oklahoma there, without a doubt. And I think he's a guy. Eugene Brooks is another guy, offensive lineman that Oklahoma's really in on. There's a couple local kids that Oklahoma's in on. So I think Brooks is probably the biggest one left from an offensive lineman perspective, aside from Brooks, right? So I think those are a couple of the guys that I would keep an eye on. I think there's a thought that Oklahoma may grab another 24 quarterback. So I think that's something to look for. I don't know that it's necessarily a critical need at this point for Oklahoma, but yeah, depending on what you look at, it might be. So thanks. I've got a lot of people in there here. Make sure you guys share this out there, and we'll continue to talk. Love talking recruiting until we can kind of get into the season, especially where Oklahoma is at on that. Jimmy, thanks for jumping in here. Absolutely. Bricks is I've heard Parker talk about him a lot. Bricks is a guy that I think he's a big time get on the offensive line. Probably, certainly the best that I think Oklahoma's still in on, without a doubt. And then you've mentioned here, Eugene Brooks is 4-star on Rivals. I think he's a 3-star composite 247. So a good upside for Eugene Brooks if he, and I think Oklahoma's in a really, really good spot for him. So I think they get him and certainly take him regardless of what happens with the Grant Bricks recruitment as well, without a doubt. So I think this is probably more of a tongue-in-cheek comment, but yeah, I think so. DeMarco Murray has proven himself to be just an outstanding, not only running backs coach, but a recruiter as well. He's been able to land some big time backs over the last couple of years. I know that early on he let one or two get away, And I don't know that the details behind that specifically when you kind of look at the Jason McClellan, the Kamar Wheaton stuff. But I think he's done an excellent job, and he's blossomed into one of the better running back coaches in the country. So I think probably your question is Oklahoma able to keep him before he moves on? Maybe gets an offensive coordinator job somewhere else. And so I think that remains to be seen, right? I mean, it's always one of those things where if you have coaches on your staff that are up for promotions, different areas. I mean, I think conventional wisdom has always been that Jeff Lebby is probably the next one to leave from an assistant to maybe a head coaching position within a few years. But there's some other guys from a staff perspective that absolutely have opportunity to have upward mobility, whether that be so. No, absolutely, I think he's in a great spot at Oklahoma, just in terms of what he's been able to do. How he's been able to recruit, and what they've put on the field. And I think, this year will continue to show how good he is, not only from a recruitment perspective, but a development perspective as well, just in terms of Javante Barnes and Gavin Sawchuk, exactly what Oklahoma's got in the running back room. So yeah, absolutely. And I think he's gonna continue to get paid well, as Hank mentioned here. So that's the big thing from a recruiting perspective. If you guys have any questions on any individuals, like I said, I think a lot of these big ones are going to they're really going to either announce to Oklahoma or make some sort of commitment here within the month of August. A lot of the kids seem to want to get some of that stuff done before the season starts, just so they can kind of focus on the season and move forward. The one of them that I didn't mention, Oklahoma product, Danny Okoye, is another guy that I think Oklahoma is still working on. I don't think that I would say anywhere where where he is favorite to come to Oklahoma, but he is coming to party at the Palace. So I think just getting him there, I think he's going to be one that's going to go into the season a little bit. Now, if Oklahoma is successful on the field, as a lot of us think that they will be this year in the bounce back year, then I do think that Oklahoma is going to continue to be hard to beat, without a doubt. Jimmy talked a little bit about Braden Platt. I think I might may have been before you jump on. But yeah, I think he has been. Obviously he's a Sooner legacy, right? But I think he has been a little bit more pro Oregon. I think Oklahoma's made some outstanding inroads with where they're at in that recruitment, and I think the stock is up for Oklahoma and Braden Platt. Now we'll see how that continues to manifest itself through through the recruitment, but I think Oklahoma's in a much better spot than they were a couple of weeks ago with Platt. Hank, any defensive players that are hot on OU that everyone is that are hot on OU that everyone isn't talking about? There's so much discussion, Hank, about this, because I don't think Oklahoma's been in a position for as long as I can remember. I don't remember a position where Oklahoma has been in a favorite for so many of these big time defensive linemen specifically. So I think there's and there's a lot of things to that, right? I think Venable's pedigree in terms of what he's been able to do in terms, not only him but Bates and everybody across that defensive line. I think there's been a lot of conversations over the last few years in terms of Oklahoma's been in some of these conversations that they been in some of these conversations, but a lot of these kids have just said, I love what you're doing, love what you guys are doing here, but I want to go play in the SEC. Well, now it's a reality for these kids, with starting with this 2024 recruiting class, that they are going to be playing in the SEC, maybe as early as next year. Some of these kids are good enough to play early on as a true freshman, which some of them will be. So I think that's why there's so many talking about. So I think so. Just to kind of go down the list, David Stone. Um, I'm trying to think if there's one that there's not very many people talking about. I would say probably Nigel Smith more than anyone. I think he kind of it gets outshined a little bit by Nwaneri, Stone, McKinley, and some others. But I think he's a guy that is a really, really solid player that Oklahoma's in a great position on as well. So I think that probably would be the one that there's not a whole lot of people talking about right now. Um, yeah, Nwaneri and Stone are probably the two that I'm most confident about right now. I know there's probably some hesitancy because it's been a long time since Oklahoma has gotten two big time defensive linemen that are two of the top 5 overall players, top 8 overall players, in the class. And so I know that there's some hesitancy there, and I certainly realize that you guys. I mean, I'm entertaining these comments, but I know that this is a little bit of a tongue in cheek from Fail BV. So I get that. I know that they're all going to be negative comments and sarcastic in nature. Early 2000s, Hank. And there was some discussion I saw on social media a couple of days ago related to the modern era. This could be the biggest and the best conversation. I'm sorry, not the best conversation, but the best recruiting class conversation for the best recruiting class that Oklahoma's ever had on the defense side of the ball. Now we'll continue to see how it goes and where that goes from here. But right now, you have to say that this has the making of being the best class that they've ever had on the defensive side of the ball, because one of the things I saw yesterday was that there's been no Oklahoma coach, including Stoops, has ever. Stoops was close one year, but has ever had top 4 recruiting classes in back-to-back seasons. And so if this team continues on the field, continues to improve, you see it has to go nowhere but up, without a doubt. There's not been any better, without a doubt. And I think most of you guys know this, but we'll let's talk about this a little bit. So one of the things that Brent Venables talked about on in the Big 12 Media Day was really kind of taking a shot at Deion Sanders in Colorado, just in terms of how they've built the roster and what Oklahoma's done from a turnover versus what maybe some other teams that have done. And so really what Brent talked about is that he gave all of these kids 12 months of clean slate in terms of, you have 12 months to prove yourself, whether you're able to do the things that you need to do to be here. And if not, they would help you go elsewhere. Whereas, Deion just came in and cleaned house. And so I think there was when, through Michael Wilbon, and I think there's been some others on social media that have taken the stance that Venables was, attacking him, because of his race. And so, I think certainly that's ludicrous. And I think that's something that absolutely was not the intent of BV in that comment. I think he's really just trying to illustrate and paint a picture of the differences and how he had built the roster versus some others that have done it. And that was the perfect comparison, because of they're so similar in terms of how much roster turnover has been at those schools, without a doubt. So anyways, I think it was just a little bit, it's one of those off-season things that people, people just create stuff to talk about that's not really there. And but the one thing that I'll say about a couple of BV's comments this year. He made another comment about really kind of the difference between Oklahoma and Oregon. I think, it's very intriguing to me to see the difference in some of BV's approach to how he has responded to some of these questions and some of the things that he said. Like he's not really shy this year about really saying how much better he thinks this team is going to be than they were a year ago. And so I like it. I think there's one school of thought that says, you're coming off one of the worst seasons that Oklahoma's had. Statistically, win-loss perspective, the worst season that Oklahoma has had since 1998. So, there's a school of thought that maybe right now is the right is it the right time? Is that the right flex to make? But I think at the same time, you have to instill confidence in this team and be very confident of how good that you think that they're going to be. So, I like the confidence, and so we'll see how that translates to the field. I think in all of his seasons, obviously this is the first head coach, but where he's been second year, there's been a dramatic shift from an upward trajectory perspective on exactly how good his defense has been in year two. So I think you're going to see that better. There's more time in the system. You've got some of these kids that are just athletically in a much better position than they were a year ago. The talent has been upgraded up and down the roster on both sides of the ball. And just understanding what's expected of them, from last year to this year, and really getting some of the guys, out of the program that really didn't completely buy in. So I think this team has, again, I said this, and I'll give me a week or so, a couple of weeks, and I'll give you our, official. I'm sorry, a month, and I'll give you guys our official, my official prediction for the season. But I do think that Oklahoma's in a good shape. I think this team, anything less than 9-3 regular season, I think you've got to look at it as a disappointment. Certainly, depending on what the injury situation ends up being, obviously. But I think you look at that for Oklahoma with the schedule, and it sets up well for them to win at least at least 9 games, and kind of the perceived weakness across other areas within the Big 12 in and of itself. So I think we'll see exactly what that what that looks like. But I think Oklahoma is. I'm not going to come out here and predict that Oklahoma's going to that they're going to go back to the college football playoff. Now, if it happens, it happens. I don't think that that's really anything that a lot of us think that will happen right now. But I think this team has every opportunity to win 9 plus 10, 11 games and make it and get themselves an opportunity to get into that Big 12 championship game. And I think it would just be hilarious if it was Oklahoma and Texas this year. I'm kind of rooting for that. I mean, I don't necessarily root for Texas to be successful, but I think it would be kind of interesting and fun to see Oklahoma and Texas in the last year play for a Big 12 championship. Hey, Deion saw you in Florida try there. Yep, absolutely. Completely agree. Let's see. So we'll sprinkle in a little softball question here. So I think so there's one more that Oklahoma possibly could get. So, there's been Oklahoma has been rumored for Taryn Kern earlier in the transfer portal season. Obviously, she committed to Stanford early on. or I'm sorry, early on last week in the process. I'm sorry, that was this week. I'm getting my weeks together. This week she committed to Stanford, so I think you've got Kelly Maxwell, obviously the transfer pitcher from Oklahoma State. That's still in the mix. I think Oklahoma would take her. She was actually I believe she was on campus for a visit earlier this week. So she's one that I think she's probably the only one that Oklahoma that's still going after. Aside from her, I think that they'd be done. The only exception I could see is if they get some sort of a depth grab from a positional perspective, if they feel like that they need that, somewhere. But I think they're probably done, except for Kelly Maxwell, if that comes to fruition. Which I think there's a decent chance that I would put the odds really kind of with Oklahoma and Florida being the top two landing spots for her. Now there was some Elena Vaughter is still she's the other big time pitcher that's in the portal. I think she is. Oklahoma's really not in on her. I think at this point, I don't know if it was mutual or anything like that, but nothing bad. Great pitcher, without a doubt. Right there, 1A, 1B with Kelly Maxwell in terms of who's in the portal from a pitcher perspective. But I think when you look at that, I think you see Florida State, you see Georgia, you see Florida. I think those were the three teams. South Carolina is in the mix a little bit, but I think really those three I think are in really good position for her. So I think that'll be that'll be good. And so, I think there's some school of thought here. If there's any more football stuff, we'll obviously get to that as well. But I think there's a couple of schools of thought related to Maxwell. I think there's a lot of people that I've talked to, and even certainly myself, that are a little bit 50-50. Do you want Oklahoma to add her, or do you not? With Oklahoma's pitching staff that they already have. Remember, Peyton Monticelli has come over from Wisconsin. Most recently, Carly Keeney from Liberty has come over. So you've got four bona fide starters with Nicole May, Kirsten Dill, and the two that I mentioned there. So I think like I said, there's a couple of schools of thought. You bring in someone like Kelly Maxwell that allows Monticelli and Kirsten Dill to a certain degree to sort of develop at their own pace this year. Still get an opportunity to be a big part of this team, get a lot of starts, be counted upon in a lot of ways, but don't necessarily have to have the pressure to be one of the aces. I think that's one school of thought. The other school of thought is if you bring in someone like Maxwell, maybe that alienates a couple of these younger pitchers to the point where maybe they're not certain that they want to be here. So I know for certain that Patty and JT, before they do these things, they have conversations. I think Kirsten Dill was a big part of the conversation. So, okay, this is what we're looking at. This is our plan for you. And I think they probably got buy-in from her family before they decide. So if Kelly Maxwell comes to Oklahoma, I think it's with it's with sort of an okay, I'm good, like that's fine. Yeah, let's do this type of thing. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here is with Oklahoma softball is that I think Patty and JT are going to do everything they possibly can. I say JT, Jen Rocha as well, and Folly of You as well now as in terms of that third assistant. But I think this coaching staff is going to do everything that they possibly can in order to get 4 championships in a row, because conventional wisdom says that this team could potentially be a little down in 2025. And I don't mean down in terms of this isn't a Women's College World Series team, or this isn't a team that has the ability to win a national championship, but maybe not coming in as the overwhelming favorite as they have been the past couple of years, and certainly will continue to be that way this year. Um, right when but you have to think, and this is something that I've kind of ran across myself and just kind of thought through. I wonder if there's been a year where a team of any sport, I think, is interesting to look at, but particularly softball, if a team has had three seniors at three separate positions that are the best in school history and one of the best in the history of the game at their position, all leaving at the same time. When you think of Kinsey Hansen at the catcher position, you think of Jada Coleman at center field, and then certainly T.R.A. Jennings at second base. So those are three big time losses that this Oklahoma team is going to have, and not to mention there's others: Nicole May, Alyssa Brito, and a couple of others. So this is the year that Oklahoma, if they can continue to do that this year, and then they've got a lot of youth, certainly depending on what Oklahoma is going to do in the portal, continue to be as competitive as they ever have been. But yeah, that's absolutely okay. That's my thought. So I'm a little bit either way on Maxwell. Would love to have her. When she's right, top five pitcher in the country. Without a doubt. And you bring in you add her with Nicole May. This is a even losing Jordy. You could make an argument that it could be a better staff overall this year than there was last year. And then you've got someone's mentioned this. I think Fail BV. Good point here. You've got a few freshmen that really has the opportunity to, and will have the opportunity to compete right away for a job, for this team. As you mentioned, Ella Parker there, who is an outstanding player. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see her grab a position and be a starter this year. I think the other one, Cassidy Pickering, is another one that you look at that could get some run, because you're looking at this right now, guys, with this roster, and you think that obviously there's an opening at shortstop. You've got Avery Hodge that's going to compete there. You've got Alyssa Brito, I think, that's going to compete there. You've got a potential T.R.A. Jennings that competes there, although I don't know that she'll, maybe Alina Torres. So, if you have a situation where you've got, let's just say Alyssa Brito moves over to short, and you've got Alina Torres that moves over to third, then you have an opening in the outfield. So I think that could be something where, a Parker or a Pickering is there. And then you've got and certainly you've got an EH position as well. That's there. So I think you've got a lot of young bats there, and a lot of good young arms. So future is bright for sure. Trap House, thanks for jumping on, man. I appreciate you. Yeah, make sure you guys go follow him, go watch his videos. Great stuff. Craig, we can play for the Big 12 championship versus Texas one last time. The talent, energy is there with Brent. We trust. Yeah, absolutely agree, Craig. I'm at the point where, I've followed and I've tracked Oklahoma football for so long that there's some aspect of hopium at this time of the year every year. I think at Oklahoma, there's a belief that Oklahoma is going to contend, be in the mix for a national championship every year. I don't think that those expectations are necessarily there this year across the board. Certainly they're there to some extent with the schedule, right? But I think the schedule, along with watching some of these kids and seeing how better looking they are this year. And I think the fact that you have to assume, that there's going to be a dramatic step up in execution this year on both sides of the ball than there was last year. So I'm really excited. There was now I'm in the school of thought. I think this team can go 10-2, 11-1. If things bounce their way, like there was for a TCU last year, certainly there's there's a way that they can go 12-0. But on the flip side, if some things go bad and this team ends up being 8-4, 7-5, then Oklahoma's got some big time work to do going into the SEC next year. But I don't think that's going to be the case unless you look at kind of wholesale injuries. I'll say some of the questions that you have to look at on this team are some of the things that you would expect that we would talk about in the spring. That's certainly been the case. That will continue to be the case through fall and then early on in the season. On the defensive side of the ball, just up front, the team got pushed around a lot. How much more physical are they this year than they were a year ago? Are the new kids into the program on the defensive line? How big of a difference do they make when you look at guys like PJ Adebare? When you look at newcomers on the defensive line, Rondell Bothroyd, Trace Ford. You've got RMT, who's a guy that's really his stock has gone up big time. Ethan Downs is another very, very consistent guy. So, you've got the competitive depth up and down the lineup for both sides of the ball that really shows this. I think the one, and this isn't necessarily a knock on Dylan Gabriel on the offensive side of the ball, but when you look at that, when you look at him, he is not a guy that is going to win games. He's not going to be a Caleb Williams. He's not going to be a Baker Mayfield. He's not going to be a Jalen Hurts that's going to be able to put the team on his back and a Kyler Murray and win games for you. But I think if he has a supporting cast, like I think a lot of us think that he could and he will this year, I think that makes him that much better. The one thing that I would say that you have to love, or that you would love to see him do this year, is the one area is he held onto the ball a little bit too long at times last year, and really that consistency and accuracy down the middle of the field. I think those two things, particularly the accuracy down the middle of the field, if he can fine tune that a little bit, he'll have Oklahoma exactly where they need to be, without a doubt. See, Hank, just like the recruiting class, you can't help but not feel it's coming. Yeah, absolutely agree, without a doubt. Robert, thanks for jumping on here, brother. I appreciate you. The development of a defensive tackle position through transfers from Tennessee, Utah State, and junior college may be the key to having an exceptional season. Couldn't agree more. Didn't mention Dejon Terry as well. Grayson Halton is another one that has, you've heard a whole lot of things. And so this team is starting to look, what they need to look like from a defensive side of the ball perspective. Now, you've got to be able to put it you have to be able to do it on the field. I'm just going to entertain this question, just because it's off season and it's a good topic. Can you be an OU fan and not so high on BV? I think you absolutely can. Right? I mean, I'm one of those. I pride myself on not necessarily being a, how do I say that? Not just having crimson colored glasses, being very forthright on some things and not necessarily looking at it from that perspective. And so I think this year is the year that you can say, I'm not saying that this is a make or break year for BV, but they have to show marked improvement this year, I think, in order to feel comfortable with the trajectory of the program, right? I mean, the recruiting classes are great, and the thing that I would say is he did not forget how to coach over the course of a year, right? So I think there was some things around, from a head coaching responsibility perspective that he wasn't quite. He didn't think it was going to be as time consuming and as much maybe as it was. So I think those are some things that he'll continue to get support on. He'll continue to work on. But yeah, I mean, you can have a kind of a wait and see mentality. Without a doubt. Hank, yeah, and absolutely about Grayson Halton. Can you imagine that OU gets Nwaneri, David Stone, and then you add them with PJ Adebari? Yeah, I think this is what Oklahoma is looking like in terms of what they need to get, what they need to look like from a perspective of going into the SEC. This is what these bodies will look like. So you're a little bit closer of what you need to look like. Greg, Georgia keeps gobbling all the fat dudes, period, on offense and defense. You can do that when you won back-to-back national championships and the odds-on favorite, to win number 3. Jason Phil BV. I know he's a troll. And I think it's fun to, go back and forth with it. I mean, after a while, if it's complete negative, we'll put a stop to it. But yeah, no, I think it's kind of fun to go back and forth. I'm sure there's some negative comments because I'm, with Oklahoma with Tatum choosing OU over USC, feelings a little bit hurt as far as that goes. But no, absolutely, I agree with you, Cracker. I know exactly. Ron Brown, Phil BV, whatever alias we want to use here. But seeing that BV has built several defenses that beat SEC teams, absolutely. I agree with you, Hank. I think, and again, this is the year. I don't think anyone expected Oklahoma to go 6-7 last year, right? No one really expected that. I think once the season started, I think there was a realization on where some of the lack of talent was, and the lack of depth more than anything. But I think they've done just a tremendous job through the transfer portal, through the recruiting classes, to be able to update that and to get that in about as good of a spot as possible, without a doubt. Yeah, there was a lot of. I'm sure there was a lot of OU. Like I said, I was on vacation, so I didn't really get to see the brunt of it, but I'm sure there was a lot of OU USC trolling yesterday with that going on. So, you guys have any other questions, comments that we'll talk about? We'll start. I think next week what we'll do is on the offensive side of the ball. I'll give you some of my predictions in terms of depth chart predictions. So we'll start on the offensive side of the ball, and then we'll go defense the following week. Sorry about that. I had a little bit of glitch on my camera. But any other questions that you guys have, feel free to write them in the comments. I will. I always go back in these videos and see if there's any other questions or anything like that, and we will make sure that we get them on here. And I appreciate you guys being so flexible. We had, I think at one point we had about either 59 or 60 on the line here. That's tremendous for us typically having this on a Friday afternoon. So please make sure that you guys continue to join us each and every Friday. As I'd mentioned previously, this is going to be one of those things that's going to be very exciting to have on Friday afternoons. So this can be really it really can be more of a pregame show for that week, and we can talk about some of the biggest games and in college football. And we are just so close. We're getting so close to obviously fall camp, and there's some NFL stuff getting ready to start in a couple of weeks, and football is in the air. You wouldn't know it by the blistering heat outside, but it is definitely in the air, without a doubt. So, like I said, thanks everybody for joining. Tell 5 friends about this, and we'll make sure that we get this get this going, and really just supplementing the coverage that you guys get about around Oklahoma football throughout the week, throughout the year, with not only with myself on Friday afternoons, but with Jason and Mark on Wednesday afternoons as well. Well, technically Wednesday morning, 11:30 a.m. with Mark and Jason Watkins, and they do great stuff. And Mark gave me a little plug on here, so I appreciate him jumping on here. So a couple more questions here. Any more DBs coming in this class? Michael Patterson McDonald is a guy that I would think that I think he's a guy that's coming in. He is making his he's making his announcement. I think July 31st, if I remember right. So I think he's there. There's a couple other kids that Oklahoma's in on, Tulsa Union kid as well that could potentially be part of this class. But I think that's the Oklahoma loaded up on DBs in the 2023 class. So there's not a ton of movement, but we'll talk about. I'll look at that from a secondary perspective, see if there's anyone that Oklahoma's made some offers on lately, or there's a little bit more stuff going on. Without a doubt. Let's see, Craig. That turns me puts a halt on our. No, I think that ball is rolling, big time. Craig, I don't think his resigning puts a damper or a stop or a halt on anything like that. So I think Oklahoma is full speed ahead. Oklahoma knows they need to be. They're a little bit behind in a couple of areas from a facility perspective going into the SEC. So I think all the framework and everything that Thad put in to get this ball rolling, I think will absolutely still pay dividends and still go on as scheduled. So thanks, like I said, thanks everybody for coming on. We will. There's not a whole lot of other questions here, so we'll just kind of pause for now, and then we will again get this going again next Friday, 4 p.m., 3 p.m. Central. Thanks for joining. Everybody, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Boomer Sooner, and God bless.